I always thought my life was a steady, quiet harbor. 10 years married to Elena, a cozy apartment in a sleepy corner of Novosibirsk, and a reliable job as an engineer at a local firm. No storms, no upheavals. Elena was my anchor. Thoughtful, attentive, the kind of woman who'd leave a smiley note on the fridge or call during lunch just to check in. I considered myself lucky. That was until 3 weeks ago, when everything shifted. We were having dinner in our small kitchen, the room bathed in the soft glow of an old lamp. Elena had made chicken and rice. Nothing fancy, just another evening together. Our conversation flowed lazily. I was talking about a new project at work, and she nodded, smiling faintly. Then, as if it were the most casual thing in the world, she said, "Artyom, have you ever thought about, opening up our marriage?" I froze, my fork hovering midair. Her words hit me like a sudden gust of wind, sharp and cold. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. I stared across the table, searching her face for a sign she was joking, but her expression was calm, too calm. No flicker of nervousness, no hesitant laugh. She meant it. "What?" I managed to say, my voice rougher than I intended. She glanced down at her plate, tracing the edge with her fork. Like some couples do. They stay together, but they see other people too. It's just something I've been thinking about. The air in the room thickened. This was Elena, my wife of 10 years, the woman I'd shared every joy and struggle with. We'd built a life together, a solid one, or so I believed. And now, out of nowhere, she was suggesting this. It felt like the floor had tilted beneath me. I set my fork down, my appetite gone. "You're serious about this?" I asked, forcing my tone to stay even despite the churn in my stomach. She shrugged, her eyes still fixed on her untouched food. "It's just an idea. I wanted to know what you think." Her voice was light, almost detached, as if she'd suggested repainting the walls instead of rewriting our vows. "What made you think about it?" I pressed. I needed to understand where this was coming from. Nothing in our decade together had hinted at this. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around her fork. "Well, some friends mentioned it. I started wondering if it might. I don't know, work for us. We've been together a long time, Artyom. Maybe it could keep things fresh." Fresh. The word stung, sharp and unexpected. Was she bored with me? With us? Her tone made it sound like she was teetering on the edge of something reckless, while I stood rooted, trying to catch up. I didn't want to explode, not yet. My gut screamed that this conversation was veering into dangerous territory, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Have you been unhappy?" I asked quietly, watching her closely. She finally looked up, her hazel eyes meeting mine. There was a flicker of guilt there, mixed with something harder, resolve, maybe. "No, not unhappy," she said quickly. "I still love you. It's not about that. I just thought it could be something new." New. The word lodged in my mind, heavy and unsettling. I tried to process it. Elena was the last person I'd expect to suggest this. Our marriage had always been steady, comfortable, predictable, or so I'd thought. "You don't have to decide now," she added, leaning back in her chair. "I just wanted to put it out there. We can drop it if you're not okay with it." It was a small lifeline, a way to soften the blow, but it didn't help. The fact that she'd even said it aloud cracked something inside me. I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice tight. But as I sat there, staring at the cooling food between us, a dark question began to take shape. What if this wasn't just a thought? What if she was already stepping beyond the life we'd built? After that night, the air between us felt different, thicker, charged with something unspoken. Elena acted as if the conversation had never happened, moving through her days with the same quiet routine. Coffee in the morning, a kiss on the cheek before work, a smile when I came home. But for me, everything had shifted. That single question, "Have you ever thought about opening up our marriage?" echoed in my head, a persistent hum I couldn't silence. Every time I looked at her, I searched for clues. Was she hiding something? Had she already drifted away? I hated how these thoughts crept in, but they were relentless. At night, while she slept beside me, her breathing soft and even, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. What if this was just a fleeting idea, sparked by a friend's offhand comment? What if it was more? The uncertainty gnawed at me, stealing my sleep. I started noticing things I'd overlooked before. Her phone was always close now, on the table during dinner, in her hand while we watched TV. Late at night, I'd hear the faint buzz of a message, and when I asked, she'd smile and say, "Oh, it's just Katia being Katia." Katia, her bold, free-spirited friend from university, the one who'd always seemed a little too wild for Elena's steady nature. Lately, Elena had been spending more time with her and another friend, Marina. I'd met them both at gatherings, Katia with her sharp wit, Marina with her quiet intensity. They were younger, untethered in a way Elena never had been. Had they planted this idea in her head? One evening, I couldn't take the buzzing in my mind anymore. Elena was in the shower, and her phone sat on the couch, screen dark. My heart pounded as I stared at it. I'd never been the type to snoop. Trust had always been the bedrock of our marriage. But now that trust felt brittle, ready to snap. I picked up the phone, my hands unsteady. It was locked, but I knew her passcode, our wedding date. The screen blinked to life. I scrolled through her messages with Katia. Most were mundane, plans for coffee, a funny photo of Marina's cat. Nothing stood out. I checked her emails next, then her social media. Still nothing. No secret confessions, no hints of betrayal. Relief washed over me, tinged with guilt. Maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe she was just curious, and I was building shadows out of thin air. But as I set the phone down, that nagging feeling lingered. If everything was fine, why did I feel like I was losing her? The next few days were a test of endurance. I tried to act normal, mirroring Elena's calm demeanor, but the distance between us grew sharper. She seemed distracted, her answers shorter, her gaze drifting elsewhere even when we sat together. At dinner, she'd scroll through her phone more than usual, her fingers tapping restlessly. Even when she was right beside me, she felt miles away. On Friday, she announced she was going out with Katia and Marina for a girls' night. She stood in front of the hallway mirror, brushing mascara onto her lashes with careful strokes. "We're just hitting a bar downtown," she said, her tone light. "Might be a late one. Need a ride home if you drink too much?" I asked, leaning against the wall, forcing a casual smile. She laughed, a soft, fleeting sound. "No, we'll take a taxi. Don't worry." There was something dismissive in her voice, a subtle edge that pricked at me. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was just a night out, but the doubt had already taken root. After she left, the apartment felt too quiet. I paced the living room, restless, trying to shake the unease. I considered texting her, but stopped myself. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband, hovering over her every move. Instead, I grabbed a beer and turned on the TV, letting the noise fill the silence. It didn't work. My mind kept drifting back to her, to that calm suggestion at dinner, to the way she'd been slipping away. By 11, I couldn't resist anymore. I sent a quick text. "How's your night going?" The minutes stretched on, then an hour. No reply. I stared at the screen, the glow harsh against the darkened room. "She's just busy," I told myself. "Having fun." But another voice whispered back, "What if she's not with Katia at all?" Close to midnight, my phone buzzed. "Hey, sorry. Caught up having fun. Love you." Her words were bright, cheerful, too perfect. I wanted to believe them, but they felt hollow. Why had it taken her so long to respond? She didn't come home until nearly 3 a.m. I was still awake, sitting on the couch, when the door creaked open. She stepped inside, her movements quiet, her face shadowed. "You're up late," she murmured, slipping off her shoes. "Couldn't sleep," I said, my voice flat. She nodded, avoiding my gaze. "I'm exhausted. Talk tomorrow." Without waiting for an answer, she disappeared into the bedroom. I stayed where I was, the silence pressing in, heavier than ever. Something was wrong. I felt it in my bones. The weekend passed in a strained hush. Elena was either glued to her phone or finding reasons to leave. Errands, a quick coffee with Marina, anything to avoid being home. I played along, pretending everything was fine, but inside, I was unraveling. I needed answers. On Sunday night, as she washed dishes in the kitchen, I decided to try again. I leaned against the counter, watching her. "I've been thinking about what you said," I began, keeping my tone neutral. "About the open marriage." She paused, her hands still in the soapy water, then resumed scrubbing. "Oh, that. Yeah, that," I echoed. "You brought it up out of nowhere, and we haven't really talked since. It's been eating at me, Elena." She sighed, drying her hands on a towel before turning to face me. "I told you, Artyom, it was just a thought. I didn't mean to push it. You said you'd think about it, So I've been giving you space. Her words were reasonable, but her posture was tense, her arms crossed like a shield. Space is one thing, I said carefully, but it feels like you're not here anymore. Like there's something you're not telling me. Her eyes flicked to the floor, then back up. I'm not hiding anything. Work's been hectic, my friends are a mess. I've just been busy. It sounded plausible, but it didn't explain the growing chasm between us. Busy or not, I pressed. We're not talking about us. Do you even want this marriage anymore? Because that's how it feels, like you're already checked out. Her face softened, and she stepped closer, her hand brushing my arm. Of course I want this, Artyom. I love you. I only brought it up because, I don't know, I thought it might keep us close. Close? I frowned, pulling back. How would that keep us close? She gave a small, sad smile. I didn't want us to fade. I thought something new might spark things again. Her sincerity almost convinced me. Almost. But the pieces didn't fit. I nodded, letting the moment pass. But the suspicion lingered, sharper now. She wasn't telling me everything. I was sure of it. Later that night, after she'd gone to bed claiming a headache, I sat alone in the living room. Her laptop rested on the coffee table, a silent temptation. I checked her phone before and found nothing, but this felt different. I opened it, my pulse racing, and typed in our wedding date. The screen unlocked. Her browser history was ordinary at first. News sites, a recipe blog. Then I found it, a private tab. My stomach twisted as I clicked through. Elena had been visiting forums about open relationships, posts dating back months, long before she'd mentioned it to me. She'd been researching this, planning it. Under an anonymous username, she'd asked how to convince a traditional spouse to agree. The realization hit hard. This wasn't a whim, it was deliberate. And I couldn't shake the thought. Was someone helping her? The discovery fueled my obsession. I couldn't let it go. Every move Elena made now felt suspect. Every glance at her phone. Every vague excuse to step out. I needed proof. On Thursday, she announced another night out with Katya. She stood in the bedroom, applying makeup with a focus that struck me as odd for a casual evening. Just a bar again, she said, catching my eye in the mirror. Don't wait up. Need a lift? I offered, masking the tension in my voice. No, I'll drive. Thanks, though. Her smile was quick, practiced. Too perfect. The second she left, I grabbed my keys. I didn't have a plan, just a burning need to know. I followed her car through the city, keeping my distance, my heart hammering. I half expected her to head toward Katya's place in the West End, but she turned south instead, toward the River District. My gut sank. She parked outside a sleek restaurant, one we'd been to years ago for anniversaries. I pulled into a spot across the street, watching as she stepped out, glancing around before hurrying inside. I waited, then followed, slipping into the dim interior. She was at a table near the back, laughing softly. Across from her sat a man, tall, dark-haired, in a crisp jacket. Not Katya, not Marina. He leaned in, his hand grazing hers, and she didn't pull away. She smiled, a real, unguarded smile I hadn't seen in months. My chest tightened, the air thinning around me. This wasn't a friend. This was something else. I backed out before she could spot me, my mind reeling. She wasn't just thinking about an open marriage. She was already living it. I drove home in a daze, her laugh echoing in my head. The woman I'd trusted for a decade had been lying to me, carefully, cleverly. She'd covered her tracks, but I'd seen the truth with my own eyes. There was no unseeing it now. I waited for her that night, my anger simmering. The apartment felt foreign, the walls closing in. When her car pulled up past midnight, I was ready. She stepped inside, her face relaxed, unsuspecting. Hey, she said, kicking off her shoes. You're still up? You weren't with Katya, I said, my voice cold. She froze, her purse slipping slightly in her grip. What? I followed you, I said, stepping closer. I saw you at the restaurant. With him. Her face paled, her eyes widening. For a moment, she was silent, caught. Then she stammered. Artyom, it's not what you think. Don't. I cut her off, my voice rising. You were with another man. You've been lying to me. How long, Elena? Weeks? Months? Tears welled in her eyes, and she reached for me, but I stepped back. Please, let me explain, she pleaded. It's complicated. Complicated. I laughed, bitter and raw. No, it's simple. You've been cheating. You come home, smile at me, and act like nothing's wrong. That's not complicated. That's betrayal. She crumpled, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean for it to happen. He was just a friend at first, I swear. It got away from me. So the open marriage idea, I said, my voice hard. That was your way of justifying it? You wanted my permission to keep this up without the guilt. She nodded, sobbing. Yes, but I didn't want to lose you. I love you, Artyom. I thought this could work. Work? I stared at her, incredulous. You destroyed us. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. I want a divorce. Her head snapped up, panic flashing across her face. No, please, don't say that. We can fix this. I'll end it. I'll do anything. I'm done, I said, finality settling over me. You broke this, Elena. There's no fixing it. She sank to the floor, her cries echoing through the room, but I turned away. The woman I'd loved was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. The days that followed were a blur. I moved into the spare room, the apartment a hollow shell of what it once was. Elena tried everything, apologies, promises, pleas for therapy. She swore it hadn't gone too far, that it was only emotional, but her words rang empty. Trust was shattered, and no amount of tears could rebuild it. One evening, I called my brother, Sasha, needing someone to anchor me. She's been seeing someone, I told him, my voice low. I caught her. She's begging me to stay, but I can't. He sighed over the line. Damn, Artyom. That's rough. You sure you're done? 10 years is a long time. I know, I said, rubbing my eyes. But I can't look at her without seeing him. It's over. Maybe, he said after a pause. But don't rush. Think it through. His words lingered, but my mind was set. A week later, I packed my bags. Elena stood in the doorway as I zipped up my suitcase, her face drawn, her hands trembling. Please, she whispered. One last chance. I shook my head. I've talked to a lawyer. It's done. She gasped, tears spilling anew, but I walked past her, stepping into the crisp morning air. The weight of 10 years pressed down on me, but there was a strange relief too, a release from the lies. Driving away, I thought of Sasha's advice. Could I have fought for us? Maybe once, but not now. The road stretched ahead, uncertain and open. Was this the end, or just a detour I couldn't yet see? The question hung there, unanswered, as I left our life behind.